Thank you. First of all, I thank you and thank all the organizers for reaching me out and asking me to present the case for Athena. I will cover mostly about gamma ray burst and their interstellar media studies. More work on dust, which for which the X-ray is very important, and later on I will go and talk about Athena and its contribution it can provide to gamma ray bursts. So GRBs, as we know, are excellent probes to study interstellar media. As they are, of course, extragalactic, and they can, when they shine, they can tell us about their environments, like the gas, metals, and dust living in there. And that is very important if you want to know the understand the galaxy at high redshift, which is typically very faint, but only a gamma ray burst triggering, shining it out and give us all the information of these faint structures in the universe. Now, these gamma ray bursts are of two types, as we know. First, I will talk here about the long duration gamma ray bursts. These are the gamma ray bursts which have the gamma ray burst gamma trigger of more than 2 seconds. And these gamma ray bursts, which I will come to the short one later, which are actually more popular these days because of their association with the gravitational waves. But going back to long duration gamma ray bursts, these are, as we know, of course, both short or long, but they are very bright. For these long ones, it is typically very important to see them very bright, as these, if they are distant, they are coming from very faint galaxies. And as I said already about the redshift range, so they can occur in the nearby universe, can occur to the very famous one also at redshift 8. There are claims of redshift 9 or 10 gamma ray bursts also, but the one at redshift 8 is the one which is spectroscopically confirmed. Long duration gamma ray bursts occur usually in very dense medium, so they have very high hydrogen column densities, typically more than 10 to the 22 square centimeter per square centimeter. And as it goes for these long duration gamma ray bursts, they have very simple spectral shape. Normally simple single or double power law can easily fit them. I will show you some examples. But to see the feature that which power law they are after, if it's a single or a double or a broken power law, as we call, we need X-ray. And that is very important, as optical or infrared cannot tell us everything. And as it goes for the long duration gamma ray bursts, these are occurring mostly in star forming regions. These are galaxies which are producing stars. And these stars at the end are bursting out as hypernova, what we call more powerful than supernova. And we see them as a gamma ray trigger, and we call them gamma rays. Now, as these are transient sources, so of course they have problems, so we need to chase them rapidly whenever they appear on the sky. So they have the problem that they appear on the sky and they could last for from few minutes to few days. So they fade very rapidly. And that's why we need these target of opportunity observations, the TEO, to track these. And then GRBs as being very intense and very powerful. If there is some dust around them, they can also, that dust can GRB radiation can influence the dust and it can crack, which is important for my kind of studies. I will show you a little bit later. So how we observe these gamma ray bursts? Normally, we are after their spectral energy distribution. As I said, that only optical or infrared cannot tell us much. Barra was earlier talking about the multi-messenger astronomy, and for GRB it is very true. We have a Stargate, what we call a consortium, which is tracking these GRBs at every possible wavelength which we can go for. So if we just take the optical or infrared observation and we want to see that how we can fit their spectral energy distribution, because they are supposed to be either a single or broken power law, then only that optical or infrared regime cannot tell us much usually, or the information we estimate from those might be, for example, wrong. As there could be a break between the optical and infrared somewhere here, between the two, between the X-ray and optical infrared, and we might miss it out and misinterpret the slope. And then as it goes for studies like this, where there is a dust, we misinterpret that either. So we need X-ray data. Currently, it is coming from the SWIFT satellite, which is doing most of the GRB observations and giving us the X-ray spectra. Although Integral and Fermi and other are contributing, but SWIFT is a dedicated satellite for GRBs. So SWIFT energy range is also very important, typically matching to what Athena has. This is going from the soft X-ray to the hard X-ray and can give us the hardness ratio or other properties from the X-ray if we are after those. I will come to the absorption later, although, as I said, that we can misinterpret, for example, dust, as the light loss in the optical usually is due to dust. So we can misinterpret is if we are not incorporating X-ray, but what about this absorption in X-ray? I will come back to that later, but normally, just to let you know, apart from this soft X-ray absorption, we can pretty much fit the spectrum of the GRB very well. And we can infer if it could be a single or broken power law very easily, while X-ray optical has more problem, as dust based on the redshift could be moved away or closer to us if it is nearby GRB. So as now we are in this era of X-shooter, where our Stargate consortium is trying to acquire every possible GRB which is observable with the X-shooter, which is a spectrograph which runs from the ultraviolet to the infrared and give us the whole spectrum coverage from the optical to the infrared, or I can say the far UV to the infrared in one shot. So X-ray, after we get the trigger from the SWIFT satellite, have the gamma ray and the X-ray spectrum, we chase them with X-shooter as we want to build that spectral energy distribution as longer as possible. And X-shooter is also very interesting in a sense that if we are happen to see something kind of like a Milky Way type of dust, which I will also touch that later a little bit, then we can cover it. Again, if we don't have X-ray, we can misinterpret the spectral slope and we can get whatever this Milky Way type dust will look like. I will show you some examples later. We can misinterpret it, that is it like, for example, Milky Way or LMC or something else. We can misinterpret that. So X-ray is very important to interpret the spectral shape very well. Now here are some examples where actually there is no dust, what we see like a Milky Way type, but there is something like small Magellanic type where we do not see any feature. So in this case, we can see that X-ray was very important. For example, this one, whole of the optical to infrared was absorbed by dust, as the dust was up to 1 magnitude or more in that case. And if we just use the data in the X-ray and in the optical and infrared, we might not be able to get a good shape of the extinction curve. But once we included the X-ray data, although after all the absorption, we can get a better handle of the slope, but it looks like, and can fit the extinction curve very well, SED and hence the extinction curve, I would say. And this is the kind of test which we were running, that do everything looks the same? Are we going to imagine that everything looks like Milky Way, LMC or SMC? And in this case, we run a sample where we tested that using the X-shooter data and X-ray data, that can we see something different or similar to the Magellanic Clouds or Milky Way. So we find that there are cases which actually look to have same kind of extinctions as in the Small Magellanic Cloud, but there are other cases also existing which give us actually extinction different than the Small Magellanic type cloud. Why first we started with Small Magellanic Cloud is because mostly for gamma ray burst, as it goes for mostly high redshift thing, is that the Milky Way type dust is very rare and we see things in dust which are mostly featureless. Now going a step further, just to tell you that these are the extinction curves which look like. I showed you the bump, which was actually inverse. So when you observe it in absorption, of course, it looks like absorption. And here we just reverse it. And that's why now the bump, the same one which you've seen before in X-shooter, spectra. Now it looks like emission, but actually it's just the reverse or flipped version of it. So blue one is the Milky Way and the green one is the Large Magellanic Cloud, and they both have an absorption feature in the middle at optical wavelengths. And that bump is, of course, changing its shape, moving from one sight line to the other, while SMC is the one which has no feature, and that's what you have seen. While our studies after inclusion of X-ray data suggest that, yes, it is this kind of featureless extinction curve present, but they are not necessarily similar to be what we see in the small Magellanic type extinction curves. So here is an example where we try to catch all the featureless extinction curves, which are like small Magellanic type extinction curve, and try to see how they vary. Even if we see the small Magellanic Cloud, it has these dashed lines extinction curves, which are all different. So whatever we see as average, even for that side, that particular Magellanic Cloud is not true. So there is a variation, extinction curves moving from one value to another, where this RV parameter, which we use to estimate extinction, is very important. The smaller it is, the more steep your curve will go. And we find that here is this small Magellanic type extinction curve, which has an RV of, for example, 2.9, if number really matter. The difference is just 0.3 as we go, but you can see how steeper extinction curves go. And that is what we see for gamma ray bursts. Even steeper extinction curves we found for quasar, and Jorge before was talking about AGN or other people, although it wasn't about dust. But even for those, if we talk about dust, this thing is keep varying, and it is very important to get the best spectral energy distribution if possible, and that's why X-ray data inclusion is very important. And then infer the dust properties very well, as they can then tell you that what kind of environment these GRBs are living in. Now, including this, using this information, we went on seeing that how dust is then varying at higher redshift. If we wouldn't have X-ray, we wouldn't be able to do this study. So these are all the cases where we have spectra plus X-ray, and the SEDs all the way from infrared to the X-ray. We build them, and we find that as we go on to higher redshift, we just put an arbitrary cutoff at the redshift 3.5. We see lesser and lesser dust because there are many GRBs which are present in this region, of course, not as populated as before, but we see more and more little dust as we go on to higher redshifts. So that was actually then a problem for us. That is it the dust real or is it observational bias? And we find there aren't any observational bias. All these different colors are telling that we tested for different observational biases, where the blue and the gray are the regions which X-shooter cannot observe if you have a very faint or dusty GRB at those redshift, while this is the range which it can still populate, but even for half a magnitude of dusty GRB, we never have seen that. So we might be missing and they don't exist. And if they don't exist, it means less dust at higher redshifts. So that's why it was very important to have these full SEDs as longer as possible. Now going back, as I showed earlier, that we could have obtained Milky Way type of extinction curve. And that was very important. All these colors you see here, so far there are 5 gamma ray bursts which are seen with having a Milky Way type of extinction curve. And we see a bump there. Again, as it goes for SMC, we find there is a variation. They could be very flat, they could be very steep, and meaning that parameter which we try to measure them, they are all they are varying from very small, for example, in this case to 2.1 to very large, in this case 4.5. If the number really matters, I would say that this is for us, for dust studies, it is very important because it is telling the smaller the number, the more smaller the grains there will be, and the larger the number, the more larger grains there will be. Or in this case, if we have this kind of extinction curve, we will get carbon at the end. Or if we have, for example, SMC type extinction curve, then we have more silicates in that environment. So that's why it is very important if we want to understand all these sorts of things. Now, as earlier I said that there is absorption there. and it won't be affecting us much because there is still enough X-ray data that we can observe the spectral energy distribution very well. But this absorption is also not unimportant. It is very important to understand, because this X-ray absorption is actually measuring all elements, whether they are in ionized or even in solid phase present in there. So it is providing us the total census of the metal column density, what we call in these gamma ray bursts. Although we write it as NHX, but it is not only hydrogen column density, but as I said, it is a representative of the total metal column densities of these GRBs. And this total metal column is usually very higher. I will show you an example later, but from what we infer from only gas column density, this one is usually very higher. So when we compare this hydrogen absorption, what we call column density obtained from hydrogen absorption with, for example, dust, we find that, of course, if we have the local group, for example, Milky Way and our Magellanic Cloud somewhere here, they follow the same trend for this total metal column density. But once we plug in GRBs, they always have higher column densities obtained from X-ray for every GRB, I would say. So there is nothing which looks similar to the local group. But what we find interestingly from these gamma ray bursts is that if we put a cut of higher redshift bursts, we find that all the redshift, for example, greater than 3, have more higher column densities compared to the ones which are at lower redshift. Now, this could be as a result of the growing intergalactic medium as we go on to higher redshift or larger distances. The more and more hydrogen along your way you can expect, and that intergalactic medium might be giving you a higher metal column or hydrogen, equivalent hydrogen column density. Now, to understand this, that is it just true if we provide one single cut, or what if we go on and provide various cuts? So we go from redshift 1 to redshift 1 and 2, or for example, from 2 to 4. Of course, as I showed you before, that as we go on higher redshift, our numbers go down as we don't have much observation there, but still, for all the cases where we can estimate both X-ray absorbed column density and the extinction, we put those in, and we find, if you can see, this slope is always varying as we go on from one to the other redshift panel. And this is actually telling us that, yes, of course, there might be more intergalactic absorption in there. But as Watson interpreted in his work was that there could be helium in these ionized H2 regions, or metals ejected by those stars could be dominant X-ray absorption sources in those cases. So helium could be responsible in these ionized regions, as it was found in that study. And when we compare this hydrogen X-ray absorption hydrogen column density to the gas phase hydrogen column density, because GRBs also give in the gas phase that how much Lyman alpha they have in absorbed form. So once we compare those, and again we provide the same cut where the black ones are higher redshift, and you can see they are everywhere from here to here, and the blue ones are low redshift. Again, in this case, the redshift cut was supplied to be redshift 3. We find that actually we see things everywhere. So that's why X-ray was very important. And then we try to interpret that, can we get the same thing from the optical data? And we try to interpret it by correcting the hydrogen column density to the total metal column, which is observed either from iron or silicon or any metal. And we find that we can, if we provide this kind of mechanism where we correct our H1 column density, which I showed you before, from absorption from Lyman alpha, and correct it for metallicity, we can get the same thing. We can match up things very well. So that's why X-ray was very important. Without X-ray, we might be getting these things very differently. Now, going to short gamma ray burst, and as you know, this popular event of the gravitational wave 170817, where we got the LIGO chirp and 2 neutron stars mergers we find. That one was very important because it also gave us at that time the X-ray absorption, which we got very first. And that X-ray data which was covered for several days, give us a lot of information. Although optical was very important to know the merger itself and the environment, but X-ray data contribution, mostly from Swift and Fermi and others, was very important. Now, as you know, both of these long or short duration GRBs, what this can GRB will look like in the era of Athena. So Athena won't go back because we have already in the intro, and Bharat was talking all about this wild field imager and XIFU, but energy range will be very important as it matches very much with the Swift. So we would not be very far off, but actually we are getting more than what Swift can give us. And there are already 2 signs proposed for related to gamma ray bursts to cover these target of opportunity observation, which are signatures of first starts, where we need, of course, the target selection based on already, as the multi-messenger astronomy goes, already knowing the redshift and the brightness of the bursts from other media. And then there is also for warm, hot intergalactic medium filaments, where you want to understand the physical properties of that. Again, for gamma ray bursts, you need to know that if there is prompt brightness to chase these bursts or not. Covering both, first I will go to warm, hot intergalactic medium. It is very important as we want to know where are the missing baryons, and GRBs could be the sources if we want to track them, normally the low redshift ones. Already these WIM are found to be around 50%, where we don't know when we try to see the missing baryons in the universe. So they contribute around 30%, that where this contribution is coming from. And here almost 15% could be covered if we go on chasing the highly ionized oxygen. And Porke was already talking about highly ionized oxygen. And here is another example, which is coming from Castra, work from 2013. And there they use Athena again observation for the, simulations for the very low redshift gamma ray burst. And they try to see that can they map the WIMP very well, and how many lines they can cover. Of course, the sensitivity is higher, what you can do with Swift or other matching to Chandra. So more and more analysis could be done, and more details could be informed from about the WIM using gamma ray burst. And the next one is, of course, signatures of first stars. And that is very interesting if we want to cover, as I said, that we still have very low number of very high redshift GRBs, particularly above redshift 6. So if we want to increase that number, it is very important to chase them. And here is actually a simulated spectrum, what it will look like for a gamma ray burst with Athena if we are seeing it at redshift 7. And the spectrum will be brilliant compared to any other space observatories if you can go for. And of course, as it goes, that if you want to compare the gas column density or the total metal column density from X-ray, you can get it very well. So that's why it's very important getting more decent X-ray spectra and more decent SEDs at the end. And hence, even for individual observations, it is very important to have this X-ray coverage, and that Athena can only provide us in the future. Now, one thing which I find that there could be an interesting science case, which would be seeing the recent advancement in the gravitational wave astronomy and the short GRB contribution. That's why I given a little bit of information of short duration GRBs. So for short duration GRBs, although TO observations will be very important, as it will be, of course, a talk of the town those days if you see another gravitational wave event. But other thing is that these short duration GRBs, even if they don't go for prompt observation right after their trigger, late time observations of these short duration GRBs are also very important, because they can tell us about the GRB environments. For example, if there is any reionization of the ejecta at late times, then we can see after the merger happen, and we can see how much reionization in the environment can happen. Or for example, for these mergers where we want to estimate the magnetar spin luminosity, then X-ray data will be very important, especially covered from XIFU of Athena. That will allow us to estimate the X-ray. The X-ray emission will allow to estimate the magnetar spin luminosity very well, and get the whole magnetar model completely. So here are some examples where it has been tried with already observed gravitational wave 17, 0817. So with all that, I would leave with my summary. I can see I'm a little up. So yes, I covered more both long and short duration GRBs and why they are very important, and why the X-ray is very important to cover their SCDs, and where Athena is already having some science cases listed for VIM, or for example for signatures of star, but more could be added, as Athena is covering the spectral range, which is very important for gamma ray bursts. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tayaba. So it's very interesting how you show that the data attenuation curve is very central in all these observations. So I have one question from Jérôme Petit.
Yeah.
You use the extinction curve from LMC and apply them at very low visibility extinction. Could it be a problem? Are the extinction curve from LMC measured in the same domain of AV?
So of course, that's why I was testing that. Should we think that everything is same and keep applying those? And in this case, I didn't apply. In my case, actually, I applied a free-form model to see that if they match at the end to LMC or not. So it was free-form. It's a parameterized model, which gives you at the end either it looks like SMC or not. So no prior resemblance being taken into the account.
So if you want to set up a good attenuation curve, what will be the most important? The extinction curves, the size distribution, or the chemical composition?
It should be the chemical composition. Really? That would be very important. Yeah.
The carbon to oxygen ratio.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we are now reaching to the lunch time. So we're gonna make a lunch break and resume at 1:30 Paris time. Thank you very much to everybody.